Ready, when Ed speaks, we listen.
Good.
Ready, Matt?
I'm ready.
Okay. This is a meeting of the Invasive Species Ad Hoc Committee for Warren County. We have one item on the agenda, and it's Dave Decker. Dave's going to give us the what for and why nots here about our, hopefully.
Okay, let me give you some paper first.
Oh, okay. Yep, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So just a little history for those of you who need to be caught up. Last January, you received an award letter for the CFA grant application that was made the previous round. And it suggested that the Department of State was going to be getting in touch with you to develop a work plan. Well, we've done that now for somewhat ad nauseum over the last several months, and the latest iteration of that work plan is summarized down here in the bottom paragraph of this document I just handed out, called contractual services. There are actually 15 tasks in the work plan that will be attached to the contract. The first 7 of which are all ministerial, basically. Hold a kickoff meeting, have a designate a project oversight committee, and so on and so forth. The actual meat of the things start in task 8, and they list the 6 tasks that will actually be part, or that are part of the application, and that were actually submitted in the original application. So, what this committee needs to do essentially is understand what those tasks are, and since neither myself nor Dave Wick, who've been working with Martin on this, are official representatives of the county, it is appropriate that this committee then consider the work plan so we can officially send it back to them from you folks, so they can then in fact recognize they've got an official work plan submission from the county. They will then attach that work plan to the contract, send it to the county here for signature. You'll have to take a motion to sign it, obviously, and then send it back. And then it will be probably 90 days before you actually get it back signed from the state after they receive your signature on it. And so that's the process, if you will. And at that point, now, once we send this back, we can also, at the same time, in parallel, if you will, submit a voucher for the expenses and local match that's been incurred to date. So we can kind of accelerate that process, because one of the, obviously, with all these grants, cash flow is a question. And so the quicker we get the contract from you to them and back in parallel with the voucher, the quicker the funds will be released. At the same time, over the last several months, they have announced a new program called the Grants Gateway Program. For those supervisors who we've dealt with previously, everything has been paper submissions up until this time. We had a visit by the Deputy Secretary of State, new individual Matt Millay, came up and met with Mayor Blaze and a couple of supervisors, kind of went over the new system, then issued a letter to us back on November 9th outlining that. And as of the first of the year, all submissions will be made through this electronic gateway. And so everything will have to be electronically filed, scanned, and submitted that way. And theoretically, it will expedite the process, because once it's in the system, it takes away the you didn't send me a copy of this, or it's not been filed, and so on and so forth. It's supposed to streamline the process to in fact release funds.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Sure. Dave, the vouchers would include
the expenses to date on the boat wash
Yes,
stations?
everything to date, as well as all the local match that's been generated, and whether it be from the fund or everybody else. And so part of that will be taking those invoices, as well as demonstrating the local match. And there are some new thresholds of how you gotta demonstrate local match. Compiling all those, scanning those, creating either a CD or a thumb drive, and that's how you can, and then transmit it electronically back to the department. At the same time it goes to the department, it actually it will go to the comptroller's office at the same time, so it'll have it in parallel.
Just, Mr. Chairman, by way of just a little more background, it was thought that, in discussions with Supervisor Conover and with you, that it would be best to bring these types of things back to the committee for review, to get an update from Dave. And here's in particular why. When I was reviewing these materials some time ago, there's an email from, it's a gentleman by the name of Kenneth Smith at DOS, and it's addressed to the chairman, Chairman Garrity, and to others, including Dave. But in that email, with respect to this, what Dave has presented, that email says that the department is looking for verification from our chairman that this reflects our wishes, and essentially that this is accurate. That's big stuff. When a lawyer hears the word verification, you better make sure that you've dotted your I's and you've crossed your T's and you've run this by your client, and you just don't have your chairman signing anything. So in talking to Dave and to Ron and to the Chairman Dickinson about this, thought it was best to bring this back to you, and probably bring everything back to you, as a matter of course. But that's why I think it's important that we do reach a consensus here today, that this does reflect what we want done, so that representation, that verification representation, can be made by the chairman. These documents can be submitted to the state along with the vouchers, and hopefully we can open up the pipeline for some reimbursement.
Fred?
Question, is this solely limited to Lake George?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, I would suggest one of the flaws that I believe in the Lake George program is that if we're trying to protect all the waters in Warren County and throughout the region, that we should be at least offering to wash boats on the way out. So I mean, if we have this fund of money for Lake George, I would like to see some of it used for boat washing on the way out, so we don't spread the 5 invasives we have in Lake George to the rest of the county and the rest of the Adirondacks.
Fred, I would agree. I think that is a serious shortcoming of our first year in the WASH program. Will they wash your boat when you bring it out? They'll wash it, but you have to ask them.
Right.
They're not.
And there's places like
Yeah.
Hewitt's Landing where you look at the report of how much was done, and it was pretty obvious they have a lot of free time. On the other hand, a place like Norwalk, they're extremely busy. So, I mean, if there is a pot of money, it seems to me that would be an excellent use of it, a better use than, different studies.
Well, I was a little. I assumed that we had some problem supporting zebra mussels in Lake George. We have on occasion gotten them, but they don't seem to be reproducing. So, task 11 is for detection, removal, and analysis of zebra mussel colonies.
And those are written, to answer both your questions, and those are written essentially, or they're written here because they were part of the original application.
Right.
And so, procedurally, and to Fred's point also, one of the next steps, once the contract is signed, would be to establish this project advisory committee as specified in the work plan. And let me just read from that so you have a warm fuzzy as to what that is. And I would suggest that this committee be that advisory committee. The contractor, meaning the county, shall establish a project advisory committee to oversee all aspects of the project in cooperation with municipal officials and the project consultants if applicable. And it goes on to say, but that committee, this committee, would take those actions. So to the extent that you want to change or modify or amend the work scope, maybe you want to move funds from one line item to another. You don't need it here, you need it here, or you want to modify. If zebra mussels are no longer a challenge and you want to redirect some of those funds, there's a process to do that. It's amending the work plan. The problem is, you can't do that before you get the contract signed, because the perception is that once you made the application, those applications were rated and scored and evaluated competitively across the state. Then all of a sudden, you come in and change the scope before the contract is signed. It gives the appearance of a little bait and switch. We made the application here, but we really want to spend the money here. And so there's a process to do that, but it takes place after. And that's why, so far, the department has been very adamant about what was in your application is what's in the work plan. You want to make a change, fine, make the case after the fact, but we can't change it prior to signing the contract.
Okay.
That's the position they've taken so far.
You answered my
Ron may
question
talk
before
to
I
that as
asked
well.
it. Ron?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the logical committee to go through, that way the chairman knows that it's at least gone through committee, and he knows it's either been approved or it's been disapproved, and those items that require board action or approval, there might be, I'm not sure, then naturally they can go to the board, but I think in terms of how we administratively operate, I think it's a reasonable way to operate. I do have a question, though, going back to something Fred said, that I think that this program, then one thing I would ask you to keep in mind, and that is in order to protect Lake George, there are things that we need to do, meetings to have to be held, things beyond Lake George, to protect Lake George. Now, we protect those other water bodies, that's true, but we're also protecting Lake George by protecting those water bodies. And if there was a way to allocate even a modest or minor amount of this resource to help with that initiative, that would be, I think, extremely beneficial to Lake George, because generally speaking, it's much more difficult to protect a water body from the shores of that water body, especially with migratory invasives. The more you reach out, the more you protect beyond your water body, the better you're protected with it at home. So I think, and as you know, there's a growing interest on the part of property owners and lake groups and others to do exactly that. And I don't know, maybe Fred, you could speak to it a little bit, but if we could find a little bit of resource within the available resources that we have to help support that initiative, I think it would be hugely helpful in the defense of Lake George.
Yeah, there's a couple of significant things that have gone on with respect to that, an Adirondack-wide program. One, I think, is very significant, which is that much of the burden of dealing with invasives has fallen on lake associations. And they have spent, just on our lake, in Loon Lake, we've kept a record that through 2011, they spent 2,000 hours of volunteer time, which includes many divers and administrative work and boat launch stewards. And we've spent about $400,000 there just on Loon Lake, one invasive in one lake out of our 3 lakes. So there's a new organization. They had the first meeting in Paseco last Friday of lake associations from all over the Adirondacks, and it's called the Adirondack Lakes Alliance, which I think is a really significant turn of events. Actually, Matt attended the meeting, and at that meeting, I made a presentation that was based on a small working group that we had of a memorandum of understanding that we hoped would get signed by counties, towns, lake associations, this Adirondack Lakes Alliance, the New York State Conservation Council, that everyone recognizes what a threat this is, that the Adirondacks have been are relatively lucky compared to what's surrounding us, and that we all want to work together to try to prevent further introductions into the region. And we've developed a map where you can locate boat wash stations at major travel routes, entrances to the Adirondacks, major intersections near water bodies. And it appears you can do it with someplace in the neighborhood of 20, maybe 25 wash stations. So we've estimated those amounts, provided that information to the governor's office and to DEC. And I had an interesting telephone conference call yesterday with DEC, and it turns out they're thinking along the same lines. We haven't worked collaboratively with them, but, one of the things that I think would really help that process, if there could be some local support for it, as there was in Lake George. You know, other counties in the Adirondacks, other towns, lake associations, many of the lake associations have a very limited dues structure, you know, $20 a year. One of the questions I asked over there of individual lake associations, would they be willing to ask their members to contribute an additional $20 to go to a program like this? And there's, you know, there's thousands and thousands of members, and they said yes. And at one point, we asked for, or actually the president of this new organization asked for a show of hands, who would be interested in helping with a regional strategy. And I think it was pretty much unanimous, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Everybody in the room. There was a number of Adirondack-wide environmental groups represented. DEC was there, APA. So I think, you know, I understand this you have to be consistent with the application. It's just for Lake George.
Right.
If there's any way that can be done either now or in the
Well, yeah,
future,
there's three things that come to mind immediately. One is, just to back up a little bit with regard to this grant, the funds we're talking about here are from the Department of State, EPF, LWRP program,
Right.
which specifically, the only water bodies that can apply for it are those on the designated water body list. And so Lake George is one of those, and we just talked about looking at, quite frankly, other water bodies in the county that may also want to step up and become on that list. That's
Right.
a separate subject. The other thing, that given the fact that that you either have or are signing an MOU amongst all those organizations, I think you're setting yourself up for a very sound application for the next round of CFAs that are coming out in May. Now you got a joint application, you got two economic development regions in play. You got
Right.
Adirondack and you got the Capital Region.
Right.
That's a big plus.
And you got three regional economic.
Right.
You got this Mohawk.
Oh, right,
Capital.
Mohawk, okay, so you got three, you actually have three.
Three.
So they look very favorably upon the cross-pollination of those. And so one of the things that I would suggest is that, such as what I do for Lake George is I, you know, skit and discuss and represent, in effect lobby, if you will, for our projects with the Capital Region. You're right in the motor house right now for doing that same thing with all three of those regions to set up for an application that will be submitted in May, or May, June, the next round. Another asterisk, just by way of information, the CFAs that were just applied for last August will be announced tomorrow.
Right.
There was gonna be today, but they moved it to tomorrow because of inclement weather.
Yeah, chairman will be there.
Yeah, so those will be announced tomorrow at the governor's,
Bring home the money.
yeah.
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 Borrow my truck, all of that.
So to the point of being able to use these funds, you could make a case, for example, if there was a particular water body in the county, but not in the watershed itself, that may be a source, a identified source of invasives coming to Lake George. I think you could make a good case that we want to spend some preemptive money there, you know, put a wash station there to wash vessels coming out of that facility, if in fact that's a known vector between Lake George and whatever the water body it is. I think you can certainly make that case, again, within the county.
Yeah.
Start going outside the county, now we're really testing the limits of the inland water body and how we want to deal with this stuff. But thinking larger, I think you're right where you need to be and position whatever entity it is, whether it's the county, Warren County, who wants to make an application on behalf of several counties, like we do now here with the Watershed Coalition. A municipality makes an application on behalf of all the municipalities, such as Warren County did here. The county made an application on behalf of all the members of the Watershed Coalition. So same thought process.
Yeah,
should go
that's
forward.
not in this draft memorandum of understanding, but certainly
Yeah.
probably should be added.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
John, did you have something?
Yeah, I had a question about the handout,
Sure.
Dave. The 6 tasks,
Yes,
came to about $607,000.
correct.
But the LWRP grant was for about $482 because, at least in part, they claim they didn't receive the, last task in their application.
No, these tasks reflect also part of the local match that's already been spent. You're right, the grant amount is $482,000. That's the amount we're gonna get from the state. These tasks over here are actually the budget amounts for each one of these tasks. They reflect some of the money that's already been contributed by, SAVE and others that have helped supply some of these things.
Oh, okay, but
Yeah.
we're gonna pursue the same 6 tasks, but
Yeah.
with only 482,000?
Right. The actual cash you'll get back from the state is 482,000.
With the same 6 tasks
Correct.
moving forward?
Yes. These are the only tasks that were identified in the application.
So is it up to us then to decide the allocation of this 482,000?
Yeah, yes, once the contract is signed. Right now, and let me give you another handout.
You sign the contract, you become the advisory
So these
board.
are, these
You-
are the
you-
tasks
you
and the
decide
amounts
what-
that were in the
Okay.
application.
Yes.
Yeah.
What-
Okay.
what's going
What
on?
you see on that handout is, there's 2 tasks. There's a task listed on the left, task 8, 9, 10, and then in parentheses to the right is the corresponding task that was in the application.
Thank you, 25. Yeah, well, yeah, oh, no.
Thank you.
Now, that sheet I just handed out, you will see, is 3 columns. One of which is, on the left, is the amount that was applied for in the application. And I'm gonna look over his shoulder here, so I gave my copy away. Application on the left is what we actually applied for. Total of $2.3 million. Then, the column B is when Department of State sent back the application with their concept of what the work plan should be based on their allocation, if you will. That was the percentage they sent back, split up 8%, and you can see the percentages. We then settled with them, if you will, on the allocations that we show on the far right, contractual services proposed budget, as those are followed. So we had to be somewhat in line. We couldn't go way out of whack with what was originally applied for in the application. So that's how we produced, and that's why we produced this spreadsheet. So yeah, but the point being, after you sign the contract, you can go in for a line item change, modify the description. We don't need this anymore, somebody else has provided the funds, whatever the justification is. You make that case, and then you do a simple, it's a letter, it's simply a letter from whatever the designated water body individual here is, be it the chairman or whoever, sends that letter, and we want to make a work plan amendment, either budget-wise or scope-wise, and assuming you can make the case, normally they're very receptive to it, because you're the contractor, it's something you want to do, it's in line with the original contract, it's in line with the original application. You couldn't go out and say, we want to do, I don't know, do a stormwater project, because we don't need the money anymore for invasives, as long as it's got to be within the general scope of the application.
What would it have been if we had included task 6? You know?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Yeah.
Me
Well,
either.
because over here, it says,
Yeah, the text up here, this is you got the essence of my reply back to Ken Smith. He was questioning why the figure was off. And it was, quite frankly, it was a typing thing where it came out on the second page, and so I didn't add to the total. This chart now brings it back in. Task 6 is part of the calculation. It's $60,000 for the purchase of or towards contracting with Heber Associates.
So we get the 482,000
Yes,
in the
yes,
award,
yes.
and then under the 6th task guideline,
Right.
we can adjust some of that money
Yes.
as we see
If you
fit.
do nothing, it stays as it is here. If you want to be proactive and say, we need to lessen this line item here, increase it over here, or we need to modify and expand the scope of this. We want to set up a watch station up at Loon Lake because we've determined that 80% of the invasives come from Loon Lake. I'm not suggesting they do. That's a justification. We want to take care of that. We want to
Yeah.
cut that off, that vector.
As long as it falls within the
Exactly.
sixth task.
Well, and beyond that, as long as it falls within the original application.
And it has to be
Yeah.
in support of the Lake,
Right,
Lake George.
right.
Okay.
So we've submitted an application, we've been approved for this amount, now you need a contract.
Right, correct. What we need basically from this group is I guess your acceptance as the designated entity who will speak on behalf of the county, and B, formally transmit back this, we've been sending back and forth with emails and everything else, Dave Wick and I, because it needs to be officially come from the county, is what it amounts to.
Okay.
That communication, Martin, would come from the chairman.
Would come from the chairman. Right.
So, I would make if a motion is required, a committee motion, I would make a motion that this committee authorize the chairman to assign such a communication as prepared by the county attorney.
have a second to that? Matt? Reluctantly? Any further discussion?
I guess just one of the, I think we should make a commitment to get together on this again and figure out, is there any amendment we would like to
Right.
make to it after the contract is
And even
signed.
beyond that, to pick up on your other thought was,
Yeah.
it's not too early to even start thinking about what's next year's application should look like.
Right.
Because we need, if the awards are made tomorrow, the next meeting of the Regional Economic Development Councils will be, you know, inhabited by folks like me saying, here's the next round of projects. And so the quicker we identify, if the county even wants to make another application, but if you make the assumption you do, what should that project look like? The earlier you get that in front of them, the more comfortable they become with it is big. This last round of applications, which are announced tomorrow, of the 5 applications we submitted, 4 of them received the maximum award. So we're hopeful, not confident, we're hopeful that they're all 4 gonna get, announced tomorrow.
Fred, are you talking about doing that before we send in the contract?
No, I mean, if it's
Yeah.
necessary to do this.
No, you wanna get this moving, yeah.
The contract signed, we should
Yeah.
do that, but then, in the near future, meet to determine whether we should request any modification.
Right.
Yep.
So if we become the advisory committee, we can do that at our next month's meeting.
Right.
What's that process, Martin, for us to become an advisory committee?
Well, I think it's sort of the intention that at this point, that you're gonna be the advisory.
Right, what'll happen is, again, contract is signed, and then, the work plan, the first task in the work plan is to hold a kickoff meeting. And the second one is the contractor, meaning the county, shall establish a project advisory committee. So again, a correspondence from the county chairman would say, we designate the invasive species committee as that advisory committee, and the members are so on.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but in our grant application, we had to designate essentially a point person. We had to, a person of authority, and that is our chairman.
Correct.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table with a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
Just, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Dave, just emphasis added on the need to meet with this committee, not only on this application after contract, but also for the May round.
Right.
Whether we're, because I think there's some interesting, it's a changing situation, it's moving quickly, and I think that we have some, by then have some very clear, specific ideas on how we think, what the priorities may need to be in that application.
Right.
And, on a more regional, countywide basis.
Exactly.
We all have lakes.
And you may agree, the application may not want to just be exclusively Lake George, it may want to be something broader.
Right,
Exactly.
that's right.
I think, don't they give extra points for ones that's more collaborative with a number of local
Yeah,
governments?
and again, you got those points by virtue of the fact that the county, as a member of the Watershed Coalition,
Right.
represents 25 entities.
Right.
You know, so you've met that task, but.
There could actually be other counties joining us.
Sure.
So,
Exactly.
And for this application, Washington County and Essex did
Yeah,
not
they're,
join, are
no,
they
they're a
joining
part of
by
this.
virtue of the fact that
You
they're
made
part of
application on
it?
behalf of all the Watershed
Watershed
Coalition members.
Okay.
Yeah. So with that, now once the contract is signed, I certainly plan on going back to those counties and say, hey,
Right.
where's your local match? We want to pony up and provide part of the local match. And the towns do it now for town-based projects. We really haven't engaged the counties to do that, but this will be certainly a good place to start.
Oh, boy. Anybody have anything else for Dave? Martin, you all set?
I'm all set, thank you, Chair.
Paul? Dave, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate your time and patience. Anybody have anything else for the committee? Entertain a motion to adjourn. Ron, Edna, all in favor? Motion's adjourned. I got somebody's glasses case up here.
Really?
25
No kidding.
votes.
Uh,
That's been for years.
Who's your brother-in-law?
They're getting bigger, building out.